Bangladesh is facing the worst political crisis since its independence in 1971 after the resignation and eventual fleeing of Sheikh Hasina. Nobel Laureate Muhammad Yunus is set to take on as the leader of Bangladesh's interim army-led government. Today we discuss the economic fallout of Bangladesh's turmoil. The country has faced persistently high inflation, close to 10% in recent months. Its garment workers have been protesting for better wages and improved working conditions, and the quota system that the students stood up against have arguably left many qualified youth unemployed. Once a rising tiger of Asia, the recent turn of events in Bangladesh have upped the country risk, and global rands making in Bangladesh are exploring other options to switch to. Remember, Bangladesh is the world's second largest exporter of ready-made garments after China. Fast fashion retailers like H&M, Levi Strauss and Zara heavily export from the country. As per the International Monetary Fund estimates, the textile sector accounted for almost 90% of the country's $55 billion of annual exports in the gone-by financial year 2024. Will Bangladesh emerge from this political mess? And is there an opportunity perhaps for India to step in and move up the textile manufacturing value chain? Well, joining me to throw more light on the political and the economic fallout in Bangladesh is Mitali Nikore, founder and Chief Economist, Nikore Associates. Mitali, good evening. Thank you so much for taking time out. Help us understand what is the economic fallout of the political turmoil in Bangladesh?
So firstly, Kartik, I just want to say that, I'm personally just hoping and praying for peace to be restored in Bangladesh. I mean, it's one of my favorite countries. It's a, city, Dhaka, where people receive you with so much warmth and love. And, what is happening today with the innocent citizens, we can just hope and pray that peace returns as soon as possible. So I think that's the first thing. Now, when we look at the economic situation, right, Bangladesh was poised to move out of LDC status. Now, what does LDC status means? It means the status of a least developed country. And it was actually going to move into a developing country or emerging economy status. And the situation was such that, the garment industry had helped Bangladesh increase its per capita income to such an extent that at one point in time, in 2022, we saw Bangladesh's per capita income exceed that of India.
That's right.
So,
Bangladesh was standing at about $2,800 as per capita income at a time when India was still shy of $2,500. So you're right. I mean, as recently as 2022, it was poised to be Asia's next emerging tiger. Is it likely to come back ever to that position, at least in the foreseeable future, Mitali?
So I think, Kartik, right now, all of the institutional frameworks which had been put in place to make this growth happen, and I, of course, interacted with a number of people in these, economic institutions, they have been shaken. And it will take some time for, peace to be restored, for order to be restored, for these economic measures to be restored. So I do think it will take some time, for Bangladesh to regain the pace at which it was growing. And also, I think somewhere the question becomes, can it really graduate out of LDC status given this political turmoil? So these are two very important aspects. But the other aspect which you spoke about, the textile industry being the backbone of Bangladesh's economy, is a very massive, question mark now being put over there by global buyers whose value chains are now completely disrupted by this turn of events, who are asking that, where can we go to diversify? It's not about deserting Bangladesh, right? It's about making sure that your value chain as a buyer is resilient. So
Absolutely. You want to
at the end of the
mitigate the
day,
country risk, and the country risk in Bangladesh right now is humongous, Mitali. So, I mean, just to jump to and really cut to the chase, what are the options available for textile brands across the world, fast fashion brands across the world? Where do they go if they don't want to continue relying heavily on China, which we've seen since the pandemic of 2019 onwards up until now? And if Bangladesh is also now falling economically, what are the options left? And is there really a case for India?
so there is a case for India, but I think that the bigger options are Vietnam and Cambodia. because at the end of the day, Vietnam and Cambodia have very highly advanced manufacturing systems that are already in place. Even countries like Nicaragua and Thailand have massive textile manufacturing setups that are already in place. Of course, India is also well poised because we have the production linked incentive scheme in place for the textile industry, and
That's
we,
right.
of course, have a thriving textile sector of our own. We also have the advantage of a domestic market, which Thailand, Cambodia, and many of the other East Asian countries don't have as much of a domestic market as India does. So I
Right.
think there is a case to be made for India, but I personally feel that the business will be split into smaller and smaller portions and go across several countries rather than going completely towards one country.
Right.
Even Sri Lanka, for example, is another option for global textile manufacturers, because now Sri Lanka is going back to normalcy in terms of its political situation. So
Right.
this is another option.
Right, Mitali, I have one final question for you, and this, as you know, as somebody who has studied economics, as an economist yourself, and as a student of economics and statistics. Muhammad Yunus now coming as the leader of the interim government. What are the top three priorities, apart from, of course, restoring peace, which I think has to be top of mind, top of agenda for anybody who falls in that position right now? What should be the top three economic priorities for Muhammad Yunus?
I think one of the areas that he will surely focus on is inequality, because if you look at his economics and if you look at the entire narrative around the microfinance movement and around empowering, the poor to sort of take their own financial and economic decisions,
Yeah.
is rooted in the framework of reducing income inequality. So I do expect that that will be one of the areas he will focus on,
Okay.
particularly through fiscal measures.
Okay.
And other two areas which I expect, one will of course be infrastructure development, because I think infrastructure is something where, urban infrastructure, climate resilient infrastructure, roads infrastructure, this is something Bangladesh has always been focused on and needs to continue to be focused on. And
Okay.
then the last aspect is really around women empowerment. I mean, Bangladesh is one country where we've seen the strongest of women being in the forefront, being in the labor force. And I think Professor Mohammed Yunus will definitely continue that trajectory.
All right, Mitali Nikore, founder and chief economist, Nikore Associates. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening.